Call the meeting to order of the Planning Commission meeting of August 9th, and I'll ask for the roll call.
Thank you. Commissioner Badami?
Here.
Commissioner Hanson?
Here.
Commissioner Janoff?
Here.
Commissioner Birch?
Here.
Vice Chair Kane?
Here.
And Chair O'Donnell.
Here. I understand Commissioner Hudas has an excused absence.
That's correct.
All right. Vice Chair Kane will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Are there any subcommittee reports? Seeing none. I have not received any verbal communications. That is, if anyone is here who wants to speak on a matter which is not on the agenda tonight, that would be what we call verbal communications. I don't have any here, so I will assume no one wants to speak on an item not on the agenda. We do have one consent item, and that is the approval of the minutes of July 26th. Is there any discussion or a motion? Commissioner Birch?
I move to approve the minutes.
Is there a second? Commissioner Badami?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. It passes unanimously. Which moves us to the public hearings, and there is only one public hearing this evening, and that is 105 Newell Avenue. And I'd ask for a staff report.
Good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioners. The project in front of you this evening is the proposal to build 4 new homes on a site currently occupied by the Elks Lodge on the corner of Newell Avenue and Winchester Boulevard. The project site is a sloped corner lot of approximately 1.4 acres. It has residential on 2 sides. The proposed planned development zone would include several exceptions to the underlying R112 zoning regulations and the applicable hillside development standards and guidelines. These exceptions include exceeding the maximum allowable floor area for lots 1 and 4, exceeding the maximum cut and fill depths, and exceeding the maximum straight continuous length of retaining wall. The project first came before you approximately 1 year ago. The application was continued with direction that the applicant complete the staff review process. The applicant has reduced the size of all 4 of the proposed houses and has provided additional technical detail requested by staff. However, staff concerns still remain in the area of neighborhood compatibility, the depth of cuts and fills, and the retaining wall design. Based on these concerns, staff recommends that the commission forward a recommendation for denial to the town council. This concludes the staff presentation, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there questions? Commissioner Hanson?
Thank you for your report. We probably went over this at the last hearing, but I just wanted to maybe repeat it for my understanding. This property isn't technically in the hillsides, but because it has a slope lot, could you comment on to what extent the hillside standards apply? And part of the background of my question is not just because of the slope of the lot, but also because our hillside guidelines have some guidance for applicants on how they should architect into a hill.
Yes. So because the average slope of the parcel is greater than a 10% slope, let's see here, the constraints analysis and site selection section of the Hillside Development Standards and Guidelines applies, excluding standards for visibility. The site planning section, including grading, drainage, driveways and parking, and geologic safety apply, and site elements for retaining walls.
Thank you.
Commissioner Badami?
So I just want to clarify for Commissioner Hanson that the architecture is not subject to the hillside design guidelines, and that the architecture is subject to our residential design guidelines.
Correct.
Commissioner Birch?
In summary, kind of quickly, I know that in the last meeting, we did ask for some more research and studies to be done, and staff had requested it. Could you quickly give us a little bit of what information was provided to you from the applicant between then and now?
So staff did ask for a number of different details. There were some details of the house designs, height, the length of eave overhangs, and such that did not meet the standards. I believe those were unintentional, omissions or elements that were non-conforming, but because no further changes to the plans had been made, those were part of what came forward. So those types of elements were resolved. There also was additional information that was provided about the grading and drainage, site work details, clarification. They did bring down the height of the retaining walls so that none of them are greater than the 5 feet maximum. So there were a number of elements that were resolved. They did reduce the size of all 4 houses by a bit, but they have also come back with additional justification. They provided a new calculation for the sizes of the houses to try and balance the sizes between the 4 lots rather than having a strong difference or large difference between them.
Sure.
The last point was another question I was going to make. Have we ever reviewed the slope in the way that the applicant has requested on a PD?
I'm not aware of that ever having been done before, no.
It is not.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Yes, Commissioner Janoff?
Question about 2 concerns that are in your staff report. One is that the FAR is exceeded, and also that the minimum cut is exceeded. In your opinion, or if you've got actual calculations, if they were able to reduce the FAR to be within town guidelines, would that also achieve would eliminate the concern about the minimum cuts?
No, I don't believe so. The cut and fill depths have more to do with how the houses are set on the site and how much yard is expected by the design. So there are a number of things like that. I think also part of those, the exceptions for cut and fill actually have to do with providing the roadway slope that is required by the fire department. So there are different parts of the site that exceed the cut and fill by different amounts, and that is described with some numbers in the staff report calling out the differences between those elements.
All right, just for the record, since we've already heard this once, I believe when we heard it before, we all said that we had visited the site, and so I'm going to assume that my memory serves me correctly. Thank you. We have no other questions? All right, if we don't, then I will call the applicant. I have 2 cards for the applicant. The applicant will have 10 minutes, then anybody else can speak, and then you'll have 5 minutes to sum. And since I have 2 cards, please, are you Maurice?
Maurice Camargo.
Oh, thank
The
you.
architect on the project.
All right,
yes.
thank you. So please go ahead.
Yeah, I just first want to, it's been almost a year since we've been here, so we've been definitely working hard with that, and want to have thank Jennifer for her efforts all this years, and then thank you, commissioners, for sending us off back last September to work on this, and we've made I hope I'll explain the ones that are the exceptions that we have right now left with. I'm going to go back a little bit and just quickly just remind us of where we started with the CDAC meeting, where we presented a condominium development as well as a 5-lot subdivision to start with. And we working with staff beyond the CDAC, we looked at different ways we could develop the four lots on the property that were closest to being zoning size lots and footprints for the homes of the size. And we looked at a flag lot, which there was really none in the immediate neighborhood to compare with. It's not compatible in that way. And looked at putting a conventional cul-de-sac on the property, which essentially, I gotta hit the right button, which essentially gave us 2 of the lots being very footprints for building a house, very unconventional. And the lot sizes became less than 10,000 square feet. So we went and brought in the concept of doing the PD with the street on the middle, in the middle of the property, and giving us the four parcels with a fire turnaround type of driveway, which it in itself, having a private street on this development brought us into having to be a planned development. It also gave us, it's 26 foot in width. It gave us 3 street parking spaces. The lots were all now around 12,000 square feet. And the footprints became, that we looked at this point would fit the site to be compatible with the neighborhood as well as the home designs. So this is what we're working with, that we're all familiar with, and this is where we're aiming, where we're proposing to get to. And I'll explain now about the grading and what we had to deal with on the property to get to this point. So where we're at and where we want to go. So the property itself, we've been dealing, what primarily has that we intend is when the subdivision was built and Newell was put in, it created a large bank along Newell. And then it was apparently in the 60s, it was donated to the Elks to enable them to build their project. That's the remaining lot on the subdivision at the time. Their only access and the access that they built was at the very far corner that we're familiar with there. I believe when we expanded Winchester in its width, the town, this is within the town property, put up the 12-foot wall that we're all familiar with, and to get the grades up above where the parking area is. And like Jennifer mentioned, it's a 14.4% slope lot from this corner, and it slopes all the way to the access corner. And again, we're surrounded by the backyards of the R12 homes adjacent to it on two sides. So these are some of the, we mentioned already, the staff mentioned already some of the what we've been working for the last few months with staff. We're contending, and I'll explain further, that we are within the Florida ratio the way we calculated, and I'll explain why we calculated it the way we did. We did reduce the homes almost all in different size, different reductions, but in total, we took out about 2,300 square feet, not only in living floor area, but also reducing bulk and height and to the homes as we did it. We did, as mentioned, we stepped the walls further and make sure that none of them exceeded the 5 feet. We've adjusted the lot lines to comply with the R12 zoning of lot sizes. All the setbacks are now met. We had other things that came up that were mentioned at the previous. We had obstructions of the lines of sight coming into Newell because of that bank that we went through. The existing bank that we have to go through. We lowered the walls, and we actually added another step to the walls to accomplish that. We added a continuous sidewalk on the private road, and now we have a continuous sidewalk all along to tie us to Winchester. Even though the subdivision adjacent to us has no sidewalks, we are providing sidewalks for maybe down the road. We also we met all the maximum heights and all the fence heights and required. So our concept was to try to comply as much as possible with the R12 standards, and that's our goal all the way through. So right now we mentioned the reason for the PD primarily is that we need a private road to make these parcels work, and that puts us into the PD zoning request. But along with that, I'll explain further in detail. We have the cut and fill that was mentioned in excess of the hillside standards, and this is supposed to be 50 feet. And we do have the retaining walls that we have. We can break them to be less than to be at 50 foot. We're proposing to leave them the way they are, in that they are curved walls, they are fully landscaped, and they're stepped walls. And I don't think that was the intent of the hillside standards, to try to avoid walls that are more like the wall that we have along Winchester, tall and continuous and straight through. And the two items that I think are, we're calling them the contention items that need to discuss further put before you, is the FAR calculation and I'll explain again how we're looking at it, and then why we feel that these homes are compatible with what's going on not in the immediate homes right next to us, but in the neighborhood as a whole. There we go. So starting with the cut and fill. To explain the cut and fill, this is primarily, and I think the sort of the tail that wags the dog, or vice versa, but the road cutting through a road in the middle of Newell, through that bank that was formed by the original development of Newell onto the site, is an area where we brought it as much as we could to allow us to have the fire turnaround road access required by the fire department. This whole entrance is an average excess of cut of 4 feet over the maximum allowable. And cut maximum allowable in the hillsides is 4 feet. Fill is 3 feet. And so this is an area that, this is what it took to build it physically. The rest of it is how we are moving into, as fast as possible, into the driveways of the first two homes. And to create this space for this home, it made this area, the cut area. Now, this cut area is only in excess of 2 feet over the allowable by the allowable hillside standard of 4 feet cut. And again, these pockets, these two pockets also became a 1 foot differential to have all the driveways. This one has the driveway all the way to the back, so it created the need for that. And then we have fill areas. This one's an average of 1 foot over the allowable, which is, whoop.
Your 10 minutes are up. If you want to go ahead and summarize within another minute,
Yeah,
maybe.
so I have, if you want to hear more, I have
Well, there'll be questions, I'm sure.
Very good.
But I was just going to, if you want to
Yeah, I'll leave
sum
it-
up for a moment, that would
Okay,
be fine.
I'll leave it that the fill is in the area that we used a lot to mitigate and raise the pad for the initial home and close off the existing driveway on the corner of Winchester and Newell.
All right.
And, yeah, that would be it.
There are a number of questions. Start with Commissioner Badami.
You've been working on this for quite a while, and it's been a while since our last meeting. But typically, we look for letters from the community to know that you did some outreach and that they support the project. We don't have any. Can you elaborate on why?
Letters from the neighbors and the community?
Yes, just to show that you made some community outreach, that they're aware of the project, and that they agree with the project, or that they have issues with the project.
Yes, I think there's a couple, a few of the community neighbors here, and we have been meeting all along, and they've been made aware.
I'm sorry, I think public testimony will be able to speak. Okay, thank you for that. I'll have another question later.
Okay. Commissioner Birch.
I have 3 questions. Is
Go
that
ahead.
okay? The first one, as far as the private street, can you explain to me who's going to handle the maintenance of the street and the sidewalk once these homes are sold?
Yeah, there will be on an agreement scenario where they will co-own the street between the 4 neighbors. And that's a reason that I'll need to explain to you how we calculated the floor area ratio for the homes as well, what I'm proposing.
Okay,
Yes, they will share they will share the private street.
okay. I'll get back to
And
staff on
that'll
that
be a
later.
legalese, yeah.
Okay.
scenario.
Has the fire department reviewed this private street with the turnarounds and approved it?
Yes, it was designed originally by them and approved through working with the fire chief since the previous planning commission meeting, so we resolved it with them first and primary, so we have what I would call an approved fire department meeting their requirements.
Okay. And then my
street.
last question was, in your presentation here, you said that you do not exceed the floor area ratio, but I assume that's based on your calculations
And I'll
on how you would like to, okay, thank you.
And I might say, I think you've explained in writing your calculations, so I don't think the question is our understanding, your explanation. I think are more fundamental issues. But, so I'm just saying that. I don't think personally, I don't think I have to go over again what you did. It's a question of, are we going to adopt that? So Commissioner Badami?
Exhibit 4, I think it is, let me just double check that. Yeah, that would be the CDAC comments, of which they provided 38 comments, providing you with direction on your application. And outside of reducing the lots from 5 to 4, I'm having trouble reconciling how you incorporated their direction. So I'll start with the town's housing needs. We need to make a finding that it addresses the town's housing needs. So how does this meet our unmet needs?
Well, in the previous planning commission, we actually developed two of the homes with secondary units. and we presented those to you. We got from the public hearing and from the commission that wasn't really that big of a requirement or something that you were looking for. So we did not follow through with trying to keep 2 units within the design of these 2 extra units or secondary units within these homes that we're presenting today. We just focused primarily in reducing it and to try to meet the FAR.
I'm sorry, reducing the number of units or reducing the FAR?
Well,
Or
keeping
reducing
it
the-
within the FAR, but trying to incorporate a secondary unit, like a secondary in-house, in-law unit within the design as we proposed at the last planning commission. And basically at the last presented had 2 options of 2 of the floor plans to add 2 additional units to address what we thought was a means to add housing to the town.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Hanson?
I'd like to follow up on Commissioner Badami's comments. Before we even consider the issue of a planned development, we need to consider whether or not this complies with our housing element, which is part of our general plan, as well as our residential design guidelines. And I'm going to go back to the where Commissioner Badami was going with the comments, and I'm going to read some of them. Development should meet unmet needs. Additional detached single-family market rate housing units are not an unmet need in the town of Los Gatos. Senior housing and units for singles, younger adults with fewer bedrooms and reduced total square footage are needed due to demographics. Single-story senior units are desirable. Below market price units are desirable. When we left the last hearing, I thought that the direction that we gave was you were going to look at other complete different designs. So can you tell me how this proposal meets our housing element?
Yeah, well, if we go back to the CDAC and what came out of that meeting too, we originally went in to propose 11 units, condo units on that with underground parking. And it was totally, by the neighborhood, it was totally, I think they were going to lynch the architect when we presented originally as a kind of crack comment. But yeah, it was put forth, and I think there was at some point talk with one of the council people as being something that they would consider. And we thought it would be, because it was isolated, and the site was a little bit isolated from the neighborhood and facing the club and courtside and facing Winchester, and being able to put the cars underneath would be feasible for that housing. But I think the gist of what we got was single family homes was certainly by the neighborhood, supported by the neighborhood, and the more likely, solution from the planning commissions and the council, from that CDAC meeting.
Let me repeat some of the stuff. So I don't think we're talking about the original proposals you submitted to the CDAC. We're talking about the proposal you submitted to us and where you are today.
Okay.
And again, senior housing and units for single younger adults with fewer bedrooms and reduced total square footage are needed due to demographics. Single-story units are desirable. Did you consider any of those? Because aside from the issue of single-family homes, there's many shades of difference between the houses that you've proposed, which are well above the size of the neighborhood, and where things could be with additional single-family homes that met the needs of seniors and our millennials.
No, we did not. We stayed with the 4 single-family residences on the R12 zone that we intend. We work to try to comply as much as possible with.
Okay, I have an additional question about the residential design guidelines. I assume you've read our residential design guidelines. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so one of the big aspects of our residential design guidelines is neighborhood compatibility, and I know you did address that in your letter, but the facts are that right now, given the neighborhood, the way that we define it in our residential guidelines and the way our staff is presenting it, the smallest house that you have is going to be close to 1,000 square feet more than any house in the neighborhood. And so I'd like to understand why this is compatible with the neighborhood.
Okay, so here is these are homes. Now, most of these homes were built in the 60s, adjacent to us, adjacent to the property. Some have, very few have been yet remodeled, and we pointed out here on this chart homes that are more in the scale of our homes that are in the neighborhood, but there is homes in the neighborhood that are 3,200 square feet, 3,100 square feet, 4,500, 3,000, et cetera. We're building 4 homes all at once, and they're new, and we are taking them to, quote unquote, to the floor area ratio allowed, a little below. But, and the closest comparable project that is in the neighborhood that was built a few years back is La Montagne subdivision, which is one lot away from our proposal. It was all built, so all subdivided at once. We have the same situation. It's both also surrounded by the same size homes. All these homes were built, and they are in the range. A lot of them are larger than our homes, and they're in the same range as our homes in that regard, all built at once.
Well, I'm going to repeat the question.
Yeah.
Our staff does not define the neighborhood as including La Montaña. And additionally, the CDAC indicated that large single-family detached homes were not a desirable thing for planned development. So again, how does this fit in the neighborhood? Our staffs and all our standards say that La Montaña is not in the neighborhood. You can just, say this stuff. And then relative to the claim that you made about houses that have yet to be developed, those would have to comply with neighborhood compatibility as well, in addition to the FAR. So why is building houses much larger than the surrounding neighborhood compatible?
Well, okay, so it's a question of what's the surrounding neighborhood. So I attended a council meeting where the council spoke a lot about this and pointed out the sheet that was being used as a surrounding neighborhood, being not only the immediate houses, but it's intended to say, yes, the immediate houses surrounding have more effect on what anyone develops, or any one lot, or in our case 4 lots, develops, and how it affects the homes right next to one, and right immediately next to this. But a neighborhood is a neighborhood of surrounding houses. And again, I'm pointing out that there's other homes of that scale. There's a same situation that was built where they build new homes all at once. That's a very good comparable scenarios to what we're dealing with and doing what we're doing to develop this in this day and age, to develop a 4-parcel subdivision in this remaining parcel adjacent to this subdivision that was built in the 60s.
Let me make a suggestion.
Okay.
When we establish that the staff said something or the CDAC said something, and we get a response which is basically, I'm going to ignore that, which is what we're getting, I would suggest we not argue the point. I think you've made the point.
I'm done.
Okay, because we could spend a lot of time on things that I don't think we have a problem with. In other words, we don't agree with that. So are there other questions or I'm not trying to discourage people saying, what about this? But I would prefer perhaps if we said, what about this? You did not comply with this. How do you think you did? Because it's fairly obvious on your questions, and it's fairly obvious from his answers, they didn't comply with it. They came up with a different theory why they should do something, which is what the staff does not agree with, and what the CDAC did not tell them. So we understand, I think, that they're trying to tell us that it's a new and different argument they have. So that being said, I hope whatever I said will be helpful. I'm not trying to cut down on the questions.
I heard the answer I needed.
All right, thank you. Are there other questions? If there are not, the applicant has exhausted his time. We had 2 cards, but I think they're both for the applicant. So that will exhaust the applicant's time. We'll now have comments from others, not the applicant, and then we'll come back and you'll have 5 more minutes. Thank you. So I've received, I don't know, 5 or 6 cards here, and I'll just take them randomly. The first card I have is for William Burns.
Good evening. Pardon my slowness. I'm having a little problem with the knee through an injury, and but that's, as you get a little bit older, you might understand that.
I understand it.
That's why I stated it.
I forgot to also say, not only do we need your name, but if you wouldn't mind giving us, just for the record, orally, your address.
William Burns, appearing on behalf of William Burns and Ann Burns at 140 Newell Avenue, Los Gatos.
Okay, and your points,
And we've
please.
been living there since 1971. And we've had to put up with the ugly Elks Club for that whole period of time. Now we have people coming along who are presenting a very good response to what was there, and something that I think all of us can live with. It's interesting, we have this business about compatibility. I wonder why the town doesn't go out and, ask the people. It's a very small town. It's very easy just to go through the neighborhood in about 15 minutes and find out, is this going to work? I don't think you've had any complaints, have you, from anybody?
Well, we'll find out.
None of these guys are going to complain.
You know that, and I don't.
Well, if they do, we'll throw rocks at them. That's just my style.
I hope not.
Well, you haven't seen me in court recently, I guess, have you?
Is that a blessing?
It's always been my style. Anyway, we had a meeting last night on this. We've had meetings in the past. This originally, I don't know, it was probably been about 1.5 years ago that this all got going, and we had a lot of the people involved. And lo and behold, today, the wonderful town put slurry all down our road so that it's impossible to drive on it. A few people I noticed did drive on it. They did that starting at 3 o'clock today. And you're supposed to have 4 to 6 hours before you can drive on it. So a lot of people are afraid to go out of their houses. There might have been a lot more people if that hadn't been done. And I'm wondering, why was it done today? Interesting. Is there anybody, say, on the Planning Commission that's greatly opposed to this? From what I can see, and as far as the plans, I think it's a great plan. And it fits in very well, and I think as far as compatibility, I think it's going to be great compatibility. We had La Montagne built there a few years ago, and for some strange reason, they didn't go through a lot of the things that they were supposed to do. They built houses taller than they should have and cut off the view of all the people going up Newell Avenue, who now have no view. Jesus, is that quick?
30 more seconds.
I usually talk a lot longer than that, sorry.
Out here you don't.
But, well, anyway, I'm free to talk for anybody that wants to, and I think this is a great plan, and I can't see that they've done anything wrong. And if you can ask a lot of these small questions, but if there's a big question, why don't you ask a big question? I don't see any. Anyway, thank you very much for your time.
Okay, we'll see if any questions for you. Are there any questions?
Sure, anytime.
There are not. Thank you very much.
That's surprising, no.
The next card I have is it Liat Perlman? Okay.
Hi, for the record, I'm Liat Perlman. I live at 183 Newell Avenue, my parents' estate, as I ready it for rental. My parents and I moved into this house in 1979. The Elks Club has been a problem since then. When I look at my house, something I'd like to address, a question that came up earlier regarding the cut and fill. Last year, at this planning commission meeting, I invited you guys to come and visit my property and possibly measure the cut and fill on my parents' property. Nobody in a whole year took me up on that offer. So in order to put any kind of development on this property, because of the way the rest of the development was built at that time, there are only limited ways to get a street in there to serve the 4 pieces of our property. You asked a question regarding how does the neighborhood feel about the development. I have never in my life seen a neighborhood so behind a development in Los Gatos in the last 40 years. Last council meeting, there were lots of people here saying, approve it as is. I've had to wait for an entire year. Let me share with you what are some of the things that have happened this year. We've had bottles thrown over the fence. We've had vagrants taking up residence on the property. We've had, most recently, a fire on the property, a power outage on the property, etc. We're looking for neighbors. You're talking about a neighborhood? Newell Avenue is the neighborhood, not the 6 houses so determined by the staff. I have always associated myself with the entire neighborhood. So you're picking 4 houses based on some, or 6 houses based on some random thought of what a planning committee has decided. It's obvious the entire street was developed at the same time. If you look at the entire street, this fits. End of story. We wouldn't be sitting here 3 to 4 years after this property was purchased.
Thank you very
This should
much.
have been homes ages ago. You're not doing your job.
Thank you. Are there any questions? There are no questions. I have the next card, which is for, again, I'm having, it's a little faint. I think it's Khalil Fatah. Fatah.
Good evening. I'm Khalil Fatahi. I'm a neighbor with Elks Lodge at the corner. My address is 123 Newell Court. And for 21 years, I'm their neighbor. And the way this Elks building is there is just a thorn. It's just a nuisance. It's been a nightmare. And you guys do not get it because you're not living next to it. I get eggs at nights over my deck in the back, in the windows, and we have homeless now go there. We have drug dealers. We have Harley-Davidson gangs go there, trade drugs and stuff there. And you guys don't get it. You want to say we are all by the rules? Let me tell you one thing. About 8-9 years ago, there was a sign for sale on a lot 1 acre on Los Gatos Boulevard. And there was a realtor's number on it. It was laid down on the floor. I called. They said the price is so much. The seller is on the East Coast. But I came to the City Planning Commission, and I found out what I can do with that property. I wanted to build a medical office, on that property. So just it is by the tavern. And then they said, there's no way, you have to have first floor retail. I did not buy that it was at half price because the seller was in East Coast, didn't know what the heck they have. 2 months later, a colleague of mine, a podiatrist, tells me, Khalila, we just bought this property with another doctor. I said, but the first floor has to be retail. He said, same time, the mayor of Los Gatos was my patient. I brought that up, said, we'll take care of it. They bought it, they built a medical office, and there's no retail on first floor. This is what, I don't want to name the doctor. So go by the rules, but pay attention to what the neighbors are saying. Last year, I remember all your faces. All the neighborhood, 20 people were here. There's not a single person opposed to having some 4 homes there. And they are doing their best. This land has a special slope. There is so much they can do. And they are doing everything they can do. And now all of a sudden, the Los Gatos is shut down to single families that have 3, 4 children. And you want just for single people to just move in that lot? Just why don't you say you have other plans for that? You want to have another parking, and then again, we're going to have drug dealers back there. And we want neighbors. We just had a fire 10 days ago from the winds. 2 wires cut from the high power went, and there was so much dry stuff there. And Toby could not come, my other neighbor. His house was first going out. And his wife just saw the smoke and went, and 911 didn't work, ran to the fire station, they came. And they saved many homes. We want 4 homes there. We're fed up. It has taken too long.
Okay, your time is up, but I think we got your message.
Thank you.
There is a question. Commissioner Badami has a question.
So I understand the fire department was responsive. With the homeless, the vagrancy, and the vandalism that's going on, have you contacted the Los Gatos Monte Sereno Police Department for responsiveness?
Yes, they come, and then that one goes, another one comes.
I'm sorry, another one comes, meaning
Means another pickup truck comes there, the homeless guy has a little car, he goes there, and then his friends come overnight, they slave, and then we kick them out again, and then they come again.
Thank you.
This has become a known place for those who want a shelter for late night activity.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you. I have, I think, just one more card. Let me check. The last card I have is Dale Miller.
So I'm Dale Miller, 115 Newell Court. I abut Lot 1 on that house, on this proposed plan. So I'm absolutely for this development, as I've been, and there's not one neighbor I've talked to, and when I say neighbor, I walk the neighborhood with my dog on a regular basis. It's Newell Avenue, any of the courts, that's not for this development. We all want houses. It's been a disaster, as you've heard, for the Elks Club all these years. I moved in 1998, and in the first 15 years until the Elks were forced out or sold or whatever they did, was a disaster. They were terrible neighbors. They never took care of their property. There's always a fire hazard. There's always weeds. Nothing ever happened. So this proposal will eliminate a neighborhood eyesore, not only for Lark Avenue, Winchester, entering into Los Gatos. At one of the previous meetings I went to, we talked about, when the Netflix was going on, how are you going to make Los Gatos beautiful? Well, take this stupid building down. This original building, my neighbor was Jack Aiello, who passed away a couple years ago. He was the superintendent for Jules Duke, who really did this initial subdivision of houses we're talking about. These lots were originally zoned R1, and it was given to the Elks Club, and there was supposedly a waiver given to them to make this a fraternal organization, but it was still kept R1. We want those lots as houses R1, which are quarter acre, which is what the neighborhood is today. So I'll give you an idea of my house on Lot 1. I have the same problem they have with their house. My house is 2,150 square feet, and I have hillside and slope and all kinds of problems. I tried to figure out how I could build my house and expand it, and I kept running into issues with setbacks. That's as big a house as my lot can take. So my only choice was to go 2-story. I decided not to do that. We did some remodeling inside, but the house was a 60s house. You would not believe my master bathroom. It's basically the size of a small sailboat cabin. It's very small. So what I expect when I finally sell my house, they're going to scrape my house. They're going to do what these guys are proposing. They've given them the 3,800 square foot house that was planned behind my house will be what will be put up, I would guess, as long as you guys approve it. There'll be a full cellar. It'll be a 2,130 square foot 2-story or whatever you guys allow. So it's time to get on with this project. It's been going on for 3.5 years. You guys need to come to agreement, compromise whatever you have to compromise, and let's get these houses built. This is crazy. This is taking longer than the Netflix, which is many, 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 many times more complex than this project. Thank you.
All right, any questions? Thank you very much. I have another speaker, Lee Quintana.
Lee Quintana, 5 Palm Avenue. I don't think there's any question that this lot is going to be developed in single-family houses. It's just a question of how many, how big, and what the configuration of the lots are going to be. When I think of a PD, I think a PD is something that you use to make so that you can be more flexible in how you set out your site, that is more responsive to the constraints and the topography of the site. And apparently there is quite a bit of slope to it. So when I look at this, I'm asking myself, shouldn't the PD be used to provide a better site plan and lot division for this particular site that works for the site with the topography? Shouldn't the PD be used to allow you to vary the lot sizes to be able to do that, and to vary the house sizes so that they all fit the site rather than just maximizing the number of units? It seems like this could be developed as a standard subdivision with a public street, but only 3 units or 3 houses, looking at the way they proposed that particular thing. So I guess my question is, if the reason that the PD is being used here is because they can't get 4 lots with a public street, they can get 4 lots with a private street because the private street doesn't have the same criteria that a public street does. Is that really the purpose of a PD? And like I said, anything that's developed here will be single family. I'm not sure that's what might be better use if it were multifamily townhouses, maybe not as many as they wanted, but nonetheless is R1. They're proposing R1 use. I would ask you to consider whether the PD is being used appropriately.
Other questions? Thank you very much. That would conclude all of the other speakers, and I now will go back to the applicant. The applicant has 5 minutes.
Mr. Chair, can we have a short break of the hearing? We want to confer a little bit before we get back in.
We'll take a 5-minute recess.
That would be great. Thank you so much.
shared by all 4 properties. So the way we propose the FAR to be calculated based on the overall calculation used for the average slope reduction was using the slope reduction for the entire parcel. Then we divided that to the size of each of the lots. What that gave us is homes, the 4 homes being between 3,200 and the 3,800. So they're all the same, about the same size, and they'll all be sharing the same cost. And so we're creating a 4 homes that are about the same size, taking care of the road the same way. The other way, and the difference between the 2 methods is 150 feet. We're proposing all 4 homes to be less than in either method of calculating it as the square footage of all the 4 homes. It's just that each one of those homes now are going to be the same size, the same buyer, the same scale buyer that are sharing the same road. And that's our basis, for that floor area ratio. But the way we calculate it. So I would like, we've really have worked exhaustively about this, and as you heard the neighbors, keeping them abreast of what we're doing all along the way. We would like to really hear from you one way or the other. I hope you've read enough and seen enough what we've done to get them down, the 2,300 square feet reductions and everything else to get us to, yes, 4 homes is what we've been working on since CDAC, but not ignoring the CDAC recommendations, but listening a lot to the neighbors and what everybody wanted on those lots. So, all right. Yes.
I have a question for staff, and it's a follow-up to Ms. Quintana's comments. And that would be, if this were a 2 or a 3 lot subdivision, can you confirm that that would not require the planned development overlay zone, and that it could be accommodated by a public roadway as opposed to putting a private road through there to accommodate 4 units?
If it was 2 lots, I think you could get the required frontage in terms of lot dimensions. But if it was more than 2 lots, then you'd need to do a flag lot configuration or something like that, which is discouraged by the code.
Thank you, Ms. Armour.
Other questions or comments? I will say something while people are thinking about it. On its face, this project does not meet a number of the things that typically we're told it should meet. Now, we tonight make a recommendation. We don't make a decision. Ultimately, the town council will make the decision. I've been listening to everybody's concerns, and I guess we kind of have to figure out, the concerns are with the building, the Elks Club, and I'm totally empathetic with that. And the thought is, if a homes go in, you're going to have better neighbors, and it's going to be better. And I don't disagree with that either. The question we have is, lawyers say hard facts make bad law. And in this case, we have some hard facts. And the biggest fact I've heard of is people would like homes there, and they're not focused on the homes. They're focused on how much better their life will be if that Elks Club problem goes away. So we have to decide tonight, I think, to what extent we can do something we don't normally do and recommend to the council that they consider that. We may say, well, gee whiz, it just doesn't meet enough things, and the council will consider that. But I guess I'm troubled because this is a very difficult lot. And when I hear somebody say, even if you put in 2 lots, which is, I think, probably not a practical way to, economically way to do it, it doesn't work. So I don't know what the solution is, and that's not our job. Not our job to figure out what the solution is. But I am pausing, and I'm hopeful that people will talk a little bit tonight about what do we do with, I think, tough facts and our interpretation, I think a good interpretation, of the requirements we have. Is there anything we can do with those requirements? For example, we've never seen what's being asked for on the way the slope is being taken care of here. Average it out is what they're suggesting. The question was asked, I think, of staff, have we ever done that before? And I believe the answer was no. So this would be a first decision. Now, we're not making that decision. We're making a recommendation. So I only throw that out. I don't think people don't appreciate what we have to deal with, and I don't blame them. That's not their problem. But we have to deal with it, and we will have to face this issue on other properties. So that being said, that doesn't mean we can't we can't think about this hard and possibly come up with something else or not. So I'm just throwing that out because I think we owe it to, I personally feel like we owe it to people to understand where we're coming from and how we're getting to wherever we're going. So that having been said, I'll ask Commissioner Birch to start.
Okay. And I agree. I would like to see it move on tonight. It has been a long time. So if we're specifically, and I believe you were, talking about the 3 exceptions listed on page 2 of our staff report. I'm going to skip the first one. I'm going to come back to the floor area. As far as the cut and fill goes, I'm walking distance from this property, so I'm by no means a civil engineer, but I'm not sure that we can meet the requirements required by the fire department for slope access to this lot without exceeding the cut and fill. I mean, so I'm less concerned about that, having been familiar with that lot and also what the code requirements are. Also not as concerned about the retaining walls because they do step back. So when you do look at it at a plan view level, while it is continuous, it is actually continuous step back. So those particular 2, I wouldn't have a problem with. What I'm going to have a problem with, and much like what you said, and it's nobody's responsibility to understand all the rules and regulations we have to adhere to and where it follows down the line on other applications, is item number 1 and redoing what we've been told by the Hillside guidelines for how we calculate the floor area ratio on a property exceeding the 10% slope. So my only, and if I'm understanding, and Ms. Armour, please correct me if I'm wrong, there are actually only 2 homes that are exceeding that.
Correct.
If you look at the chart that Ms. Armour put together on page 3, it appears to only be Lot 1 and Lot 4 that are exceeding the maximum area floor ratio that is required by our hillside. So I feel like we're not that far off, actually, from not having that. So I would not personally want to change how we look at the floor area ratio on a hillside when I actually feel like the numbers are very achievable just by looking at the square footages here. So that's where I am on looking at these 3 points.
Do I understand you to say then that you think something could be done with that one condition which is not presently being met?
I believe that the square footage of those homes could be brought down into compliance, and therefore we wouldn't be asking for, we could find reasons on the other 2 that would be brought into compliance that I can only speak for myself, I would be comfortable with then with the PD as it stands.
Normally, I would think we would like to know what that means to reduce the size. You could do a calculation.
No, I don't need to. It's right here on page 3.
Okay.
If, for example, Ms. Armour has put together a great chart here that says the requirements, for example, on Lot 1, if we are going by the Hillside guidelines, is that the maximum floor area ratio for Lot 1, the home, is 3,336. They have proposed 3,592. I'm saying bring it to what's the 3,036, and the same on Lot 4, and then I would not have much of an issue, but I don't know that I want to start messing with how we calculate the floor area ratio with the slopes, because I can, pun intended, being that a slippery slope that we would get into.
Okay. Other comments? Commissioner Hanson.
So I asked a lot of questions earlier, but I did want to say that I do absolutely 100% feel sympathetic to the issue with the Elks Lodge, and I do believe that residential should be going into this property. So then it comes down to the details. And ideally, we would have a proposal that fit more with our code, and that way we could easily approve it. So we have these, complex issues, which one is just the compliance with code and our plans, and then there's also the request for the PD. So in terms of the request for the PD, the stated purpose of the PD is to provide for alternative uses and developments that are more consistent with the site characteristics to create optimum quantity and use of open space and encourage good design. There's probably some arguments that could be made if there was less units, that it might have less need for a PD, but I didn't hear anything that would eliminate the need for the PD altogether if residential is going to be put in here at any quantity more than 2 units, which may not be economically feasible. So that being the case, it seems like it would be necessary to do the PD. As far as Commissioner Burgess' comments, I agree with her about the cut and fill and the retaining wall. As far as the floor area ratio, I think that although there's a maximum floor area ratio, I think it's clear in our residential design guidelines and our code that that the FAR is not a goal, it is a maximum. And so, we frequently see development proposals where they go to the maximum FAR, and then it comes down to an issue of neighborhood compatibility. So I don't think it would be completely unreasonable for this to be more in terms of size of the neighborhood. There could still be 4 units, but the maximum square footage doesn't need to be more than 2,500. That would get the additional requirement of doing something and having smaller unit sizes and being more in the range of meeting some of the needs of some of our young professionals, but it would still be a perfectly decent sized house. So for me, I would like to see this go forward with much smaller unit sizes, more in line with the neighborhood.
Other comments? Vice Chair Kane?
I think a picture is worth 1,000 words. Commissioner Hanson has referred to the intent of the planned development overlay zone, and she did it back in September of last year. I watched the whole tape today and feel like I'm getting deja vu all over again. The PD is supposed to provide alternative uses, as has been said, more consistent with site characteristics, so to create optimum quality, use of open space, encourage, I'm going to stop right there, use of open space. Look at the 2 projects. Back in September of last year, there were comments made about where do the children play, and do they play even without those sidewalks, which we now have. But what we have here is 4 large units crammed in. And our town asks that we not do that. Our town has the codes, it has the residential design guidelines, the hillsides, all to protect and preserve, while also recognizing the rights of developers to develop. They just have to do it within code. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say, hypothetically, had that happened 3 years ago, the Elks Lodge wouldn't be there. So I don't think we blocked them. We're trying to, as you said, live by the codes and ordinances that we took an oath to uphold, and we have a project that doesn't do that. So it's hard for us to support it, even though the Elks Lodge is a great burden on all the neighbors. Didn't have to be that way. Well, maybe we can find a way to get something done, but what I'm faced with is staff saying the project does not comply with town code, the applicable sections of the hillside design guidelines, the residential design guidelines, or the general plan, and the sizes of the homes are not compatible with surrounding area. These are key principles that we use to protect and preserve the town. We can't just give them away. And had we found a way to comply with these, there'd be something up there 3 years ago, and maybe a whole bunch more open space.
Let me say something. I think what Commissioner Birch said was persuasive to me, and that is a lot softer, I think. Really, if I understand it correctly, and Commissioner Birch can correct me, but if I understand it correctly, you could support a motion that would reduce the size of 2 lots as suggested, which we have discussed, the 2 numbered lots. You could support a motion such as that, notwithstanding the other problems. And I feel the same way. This property has been looking for a use now for quite a while. And there's a reason for that. It's a very difficult piece of property. And I don't believe that, I believe that this project, if modified really slightly, could satisfy the developer, could satisfy the neighbors. Now, it has to go before the council, and the council could say exactly as the vice chair just said, everything he said was correct. And therefore, I'm perhaps being more lenient, as is perhaps Commissioner Birch. But I think we have a focus now. I think we have 2 possibilities. There's always more, I suppose, but I see it as 2 possibilities at the moment. We can say, gee whiz, we'd really like to support this, but it has too many things it doesn't comply with, and we'll let the town council figure out how they do that. Or we can say, well, Commissioner Birch had a really good idea, and we can really narrow it down and say we could support this to the planning commission, to the council, except for these 2 items, and those are not dramatic reductions in size. So perhaps it's something that the developer could take, or the developer could argue to the council, no, it's too much or whatever. But as far as our job, I'm leaning towards trying to move this project along, but I'm totally understanding if people say that's all well and good, but that's not our job. So I would invite a motion now, unless somebody wants to make some more comments. Commissioner Badami.
Yeah, I would just like to make my comments. No doubt about it, there's been abuse of the plan development overlay zone, and it's a bone of contention within the town and amongst us when we make our decisions. So I can see the arguments, pro and con, that the commissioners have brought forward. But when we talk about a picture's worth 1,000 words, what that picture doesn't tell you is that due to the topography of where this is in the intersection, it's very massive because of its location right there at that T intersection. So it's pretty formidable looking with the size and mass and scale of the 4 homes. Trying to reduce 2 of them, that might make sense, but I can't make a decision and feel comfortable with it without seeing a redesign. And quite frankly, I'm really struggling to see how this meets the intent of the plan development overlay zone in regard to the open space, as Commissioner Kane had pointed out, and also setting precedent for future applications.
All right, any other comments? Please.
So I think we've heard really compelling information from the applicant, compelling testimony from the neighborhood. We have our rules, we have our marching orders, and so we're kind of between a rock and a hard space. So we're really trying to get to a place where everyone is happy with some expedience. I do agree that we should relax those 2 bullets as Commissioner Birch has recommended, and I also agree that the size of the houses are too large. While we can bring down 2, that still leaves 2 that are pretty massive, and as Commissioner Badami mentioned, the aspect of those houses where they sit on the hillside looks pretty dense. So it really misses the neighborhood compatibility mark for me. In that regard, there's just a massive building there. It doesn't read to me any differently from office buildings or condominiums. It's just really dense. If you were to bring the house size down, perhaps more houses on the lot, I don't know what makes sense in terms of numbers, but the simple square footage is just too much. And when you look at the aspect from the corner, and this is a prominent corner in the town, so we do want to get it right. We do want it much, much improved over what's there. But I have a sense that it can be brought more visually compatible as well as within the FAR.
Let me again throw this out. I'm listening to this, trying to think what practical kind of recommendation can we make. And what I'm again hearing, I think what Commissioner Birch said is very helpful, but I also think when you talk about the mass and scale of these homes as located, it is pretty darn significant. And it's true you would have to reduce 2 of those homes simply to satisfy one of the problems we're concerned with. But I think Commissioner Janoff is correct that as you drive into town from Lark or wherever, they're going to be awfully big in your face. So we could also consider, because again, we're not making the decision, we could say we recommend the approval of the project subject, however, to a reduction in the size of the units to get rid of the bulk and mass. I would give the developer a chance to talk about those numbers with the council. And 2, that to satisfy the other problem we identified, you have to reduce, in any event, the size of the 2 lots that we talked about. Now, if you address the problem that Commissioner Janoff talked about, it may be possible you can just satisfy all of them in any event. So I'm just saying, rather than a flat-out no or a flat-out yes, because we don't have that ability here, I don't think, for good reason, I would encourage a motion to make a recommendation to the council that could help both the citizens, the developer, and the council, because ultimately they're going to have to deal with the bulk and mass, I think, and we're not, I don't want to send the developer back to the drawing board. This has been going on far too long, but if I were the developer and I were coming before the council, I might give some real thought to how I could do that and perhaps discuss that with the council. So I'm just expressing my feelings. I'm not making a motion, but that's my thought. Now I'm going to ask Vice Chair Kane.
I think a motion is imminent, but as I listen, I see the micro picture and the neighbors, and I see the macro picture, which is the town and the future. To support or imply that we're supporting a project that does not comply with the town code, the hillsides, the residential, the general plan, compatibility within the neighborhood. The variable is economic feasibility, and I can't do that. That's the only variable.
All right, do we have a motion? Anyone want to hazard a motion? Commissioner Birch?
I'm going to hazard one because I think I know where we'll go, and then it'll lead to another discussion. So, I'm going to make a motion that we recommend approval. However, I'm going to have some caveats to that approval for Plan Development Application PD-14-002 and Mitigated Negative Declaration ND-16-002 at 105 Newell Avenue, requesting approval of a plan development to rezone a property from R112 to R112 PD and allow demolition of an existing building, a 4-lot subdivision, and construction of 4 single-family residences on property zoned R12, but will be R112 PD, anyway. Do I need to go through, all these findings first?
I would suggest that you said caveat, and I think you mean conditions.
Yep. So, okay. My conditions to my putting out an approval rather than a denial would be the following. The overall square footage of the homes needs to be reduced. They're very large, it's a prominent corner. At minimum, I would say all units need to meet the FAR as laid out by staff per the hillside percentage slope guidelines. On top of that, I would recommend, I would like to see Lot 4, because it's on the corner, be a single-story property. It's already almost 27 feet tall, and then with the slope, you wind up with a over 40-foot height on that corner that I believe is part of what the discussion has been as far as the impact. I'm not going to put, I know oftentimes we say, well, you want them smaller, how much? That's why I'm putting the caveat of the FAR. I can't say a size to that because I'm not going to redesign it.
And you're conditioning it, right?
Yeah, and so then I'm saying, I understand the cut and fill. Anything I think that's going to go in here is going to have the cut and fill issue. I'm going to be really specific. I'm okay with the retaining walls as shown on the 3-2-17 drawing set, because the previous retaining wall did not have this step-back feature, and now we do. So I want to be very specific to the set of documents that we're referencing for that approval, because I don't want to see it suddenly fall back to what it was previously, and my name saying I approved that, so.
Okay, and then the other things that you sidestep for the moment would be the requirements that we have to make.
Yeah.
Approve. And those are the normal requirements which are set forth in the staff's report.
Yeah, which I, that the project is consistent with, I'm not finding the other requirements, so. I don't know that I have Exhibit 3, I think is the problem.
So for Commissioner Birch, I think you can simply reference Exhibit 3 from the September 14, 2016 staff report, which contained all the findings.
That's what I'm doing.
Is there a second? Because I'll second it.
Okay.
Is there discussion? Commissioner Janoff?
A question, when the motion says that at minimum, the houses should be within the FAR, that does leave open the opportunity for two of those homes to increase in square footage, and I don't think that would be our intent.
And I don't think she meant that.
No, I did not mean that. Thank you very much. It's not that the intentions that Lot 2 and 3 now grow to meet the FAR. They would stay as they are. The other two lots would reduce. Thank you.
But let me ask a question on the motion, too, because the discussion I've heard is the houses in general are too big. And you've also pointed out one particular house, because of the geographical setup, it's even has more trouble. I think if we simply suggest to the council that we think the houses are too big, we don't have.
That's why I wasn't giving a number.
Right, we don't have to have a number. Somebody will have to make the number, but you have also pointed out a particular problem, and we know when we said at a minimum, I don't think we meant at a minimum. The houses are too large.
Yeah.
So that's between the developer and the council as
Right.
to what number they would assign to each house. So you're not approving tonight any specific number, at least under this motion as I understand it. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Hanson?
So, so my question still remains in terms of being able to support the motion about neighborhood compatibility. So when I heard your motion, Commissioner Birch, is more about taking steps towards that, but I still feel that we don't have to have a number in our recommendation to council, but I mean, for me to feel comfortable recommending to council, I'd want to see a pretty substantial size reduction that would be more in keeping with the neighborhood, not to just meet the required numbers in our code, because as I said, FAR is not a goal. And so, and they're pretty far off the neighborhood by anyone's definition. I mean, La Montaña is not the neighborhood. I would want to see, and I would hope that council would consider asking the applicant to make a more significant size reduction in like the idea that you suggested about a single-story unit for one of the units. I mean, I don't think that's unreasonable to ask. They'd still be pretty sizable units. So without saying the number, I just want to see it be more substantial to bring it in line with neighborhood compatibility is what I'm looking for.
Okay, perhaps I'll ask the motion maker on this, and I perhaps have understood the motion the way I wanted to understand the motion. But I really think most of us have said they're too big.
Yeah.
I'm trying to stay away from numbers.
Yeah.
Because I don't think we have to go there. But if everybody feels, for example, we really ought to get in numbers or percentages or be more,
No.
To be clearer about that, I'm not fighting that, but I just don't feel I have enough facts tonight to tell the developer, for example, everything's got to be 2,500 square feet. I don't think that's necessary, and I certainly don't feel comfortable with that.
Can I ask a quick question as far as adding?
Just finish my one sentence, which would be that perhaps I'm just trying to pass it along to the council, but the reason I'm trying to pass it along to the council is it gives the developer time he doesn't have tonight, because he's listening to us, to respond to these very serious issues. Now, that having been said, Commissioner Janoff.
I understand the reluctance to provide specific numbers, but it seems to me, in my limited time on the Planning Commission, that that has posed additional problems or complexity when we pass it up to the town council. And when we say reduce, and when the town council says reduce, and we don't give specific numbers or some general idea, reducing it by 100 square feet is a reduction, but it isn't the size of reduction that we're really talking about. So even though we may be reluctant to provide a specific number, I think a range of numbers would be reasonable and better guidance. And perhaps it's something like the average house of the immediate neighborhood on Newell, plus or minus a certain number of square feet. I mean, it has to, I think in fairness to the developer, if there's going to be any sort of a rework, we should give a better framing of what we mean by reduce.
I don't argue that, but let me just say one thing. Ultimately, the council will decide, and we can say exactly what you've said, and maybe that's what everybody wants to do. But in the final analysis, the council will say whatever each house should be. I perhaps have more confidence that the council wouldn't say, oh, we're going to make it 100 feet, because they didn't tell us. The discussion tonight is it's too big. And clearly, I think the council, how do you phrase this? The council understands that 100 feet is not going to change, it's too big. But that's fine. If somebody wants to somebody wants to ask the motion maker to make an amendment to the motion in some specific way, now would be the time to do it. Yes, Commissioner Hanson.
So what I was asking Commissioner Birch is if she would be willing to consider adding on something to the effect of it to bring the houses more in line with the neighborhood as defined in the staff report.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was raising my hand, saying, what if I put in wording that said that?
Okay, and as a seconder, I would accept that too. Vice Chair Kane.
Well, staff or someone has provided us with many, 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 many houses and sizes.
But that's
and-
not what they define as the neighborhood.
No, but the neighborhood is part of this. So if we want to give advice to council, the houses on Newell, for example, would be a good comparison.
No,
If they
no,
want to
they give us the comparison. They tell us what houses we're comparing it to. We don't need a long list.
Right. I'm just building toward the residential design guidelines, which has prohibitive language on the largest house in the neighborhood, and this would be largest 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's what we want to come down to, is the neighborhood, as the commissioner said.
The
The
neighborhood
data
as
and the
defined.
as defined. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Are there other questions, comments, requests for any amendments? Commissioner Badami?
I'm still having trouble with the motion. There's so many gray areas for me to feel comfortable with. I mean, I'd like to see the project reduced and know what I'm dealing with. It's kind of, we're sending something on that we don't really know what it's going to look like. You can reduce square footage, but you can still have design that still looks bulky and massive in that intersection.
That's
So-
fine, then I would vote no if I were you. Okay.
What?
Anybody else have? Right, we're not going to.
All right, cut to the chase.
That's not the motion. Are there other comments or questions? Vice Chair Kane.
We have the alternative to continue the matter to a certain date. This isn't an up or down vote, it's only a recommendation. But alternatively, the commission seems to have the ability to take another look at it if that was prudent and worthwhile. I think that's what Commissioner Badami is saying. Let's know what we're sending upstairs.
That's two. I'm going to call I'll just call the question, and I'll see where we are. So, all those in favor of the motion say aye. So we have 4 votes in favor. So it will pass. And
Ask for the contraries.
are there
Those opposed.
abstentions? No. So there are 2 no votes, is that correct? Okay. So I'll ask Mr. Paulson to comment on well, there's no appeal because it's a recommendation. So now we'll be set before the council, is that correct?
That is correct.
So I think we're finished on this matter, is that correct?
That's correct. I'll just, for the record, state that the motion for the recommendation to the council with modifications was approved 4-2 with Vice Chair Kane and Commissioner Badami opposed.
Yes.
And just to confirm, obviously, even though we did that, there was a lot of extremely good input from anyone that didn't even agree with the motion, that all of that will be in transcript given to council. So those that didn't support the motion, all of their concerns will be equally addressed in that meeting,
The
correct?
council will receive verbatim minutes of the hearing this evening.
Good.
Okay, that being the case, the matter is it's closed.
May I address the commission for just a minute? I suppose we know it is. I just want to share a couple of thoughts with you.
Well, why don't you tell us after the meeting then, because I think this matter is concluded. That's good. All right, okay, that's fine. We have no other matters on the agenda except any staff report, your report.
Thank you, Chair O'Donnell. So, as I'm sure many of you are aware, the council took an action last week on the Phase 1 North 40 applications. Those were approved. The council will be considering a moratorium for the remainder of the North 40 specific plan area next Tuesday, and then we will move forward from there. And
Let me ask a question on that. The only, if I understand it, there is no more appeal, but if a remedy were sought, it would be a writ of mandate. Do you recall how long someone filing that motion would have?
I don't. I'm not sure if
I
Ms.
can't remember
Lampros
if it's
does.
30 or longer.
Typically, it's 30 following, for like when you file a notice of determination for a CEQA document.
Whatever it
usually
is,
it's
I'm
30.
just saying, theoretically, therefore, it's kind of not final in my mind until we let that time run. And so, at some point, council can let us know when that time runs.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any comments from the commission? There being none, we'll stand adjourned.